Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 868B, and today's date is January 15th, 2016, and the title of the episode is The U.S. Government Has an Internet Kill Switch, and it will be used during a national crisis. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I uploaded an interview with Joseph Meyer. It is on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, so you can go right over to that channel and take a look at it. Or you can come over to the x22report.com site. You can scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, you'll see the video there. Or you can go to newssentinel.com. This is my news site where I'm streaming in many different news sites from around the world into one location so you can figure out and keep track of what is going on in the world. And that is newssentinel.com, newssentinel.com. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, in previous reports, I discussed how the government has an internet kill switch. And of course, many people do not believe this. They don't believe that there is such a thing. And EPIC, which is the Electronic Privacy Information Center, they were petitioning the Supreme Court to hear their case because they want documents revealed which would reveal the kill switch that the government has. Very interestingly, the Supreme Court declined to hear their petition, and they were trying to force the Department of Homeland Security to release the details of this switch and the protocols to shut down the cell phone and internet service during an emergency. EPIC, they've been fighting this since 2011 to release the details of the program, which is known as Standard Operating Procedure 303. On March 9, 2006, the National Communications System, NCS, approved SOAP 303. However, it was never released to the public. Now, EPIC received certain documents on what it was, and the document that they have basically shows there is a shutdown and restoration process for use by commercial and private wireless networks during a national crisis. So if the United States was under some type of national crisis, some type of an event, the government can basically kill the internet, kill the cell phone service. And people say, well, why would they want to do this? Well, you have to remember, if they do kill the internet and they do kill the cell phone service, if we're under some type of false flag event, let's say, where many different cities are being bombed, the financial institutions are being cyber attacked, they would say, listen, the only way to stop this, because we don't know where the next hit will be, we're going to have to bring down the internet. Because the financial institution, the stock market, they're being attacked. We don't know if it's malware that's implanted in these systems. And they will shut it down. Just like they had the procedures to shut the entire air traffic over the United States down during 9/11. So this would be a national crisis, and this would be a time and place that they would use this. And remember, once they shut this down, all internet news reporting, all videos, all cell phone transmissions cease to exist. And where do you get your news and your information at that point? The corporate media. You see what they're trying to do here. They are basically setting it up. They're going to tell you it's in your best interest. And yes, will this hurt many businesses? Of course it will. But we need to remember one important fact. The system that they've created is dead. It's collapsing. And at this point, once this occurs, the system completely collapsed. Because we know they have what's called the bail-in documents. We know the governments aren't going to bail out the central bankers. We know they're going to be going into the banks so everything can keep operating. And they will shut down the stock market. They will shut down the banking system. They will shut down the internet transmission of data. They will shut down the cell towers. And they will control that entire arena. You will get your information from the TV, from the corporate media, from whatever the government wants to tell you. And at this point in time, this will be a call for war. And there will be no way of getting any type of information from anywhere else, especially on the internet. Now, if you have shortwave radio and those type of things, yes, you'll still be able to access that and get information. But what we're seeing right now is they are prepared and ready. And they will use this in a national crisis when everything has failed, when they have to bring on the false flag event, and they are desperate to start this war to cover all of this up. They will go ahead and do this. And of course, later on, they'll bring everything back up once we are in the war. Now, out in Afghanistan, we know the United States government central bankers, NATO, never leaving Afghanistan. Never were going to leave, even though the president told us that the U.S. troops were coming home. We're seeing the opposite occur right now. And what's very interesting about Afghanistan, a lot of money is thrown in there to the Afghanistan government to rebuild, to build their infrastructure. And the Cigar Report found that the Department of Defense Task Force for Business Stability Operations and the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, are failing to accomplish their collective mission. And so far, there's been about $500 million spent in Afghanistan since 2009 to develop the industry in Afghanistan. And all of this money that's been thrown into here has kind of disappeared. And a watchdog group said, listen, the things they wanted to do would only cost about $300,000. I don't know why this total right now is up to $500 million, because we know what they're doing with it. They're putting it into their pockets. It's being siphoned off, just like everything else the government does. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Poroshenko. He admits to coordinating actions of radicals where they brought down the power in Crimea. He says he's basically working with them for this ongoing energy blockade. But we know Crimea is now working with Russia, and they laid power cables through the Kerch Strait to bring power into Crimea, and they're cutting themselves off from Ukraine. They're saying they don't want the power from Ukraine anymore, so it really doesn't matter. We know the United States government central bankers passed the omnibus bill, and we know there's a lot of aid going towards Ukraine. And inside the bill, we see they were going to ban aid to the neo-Nazi type of groups operating inside Ukraine. And what's very interesting is when this omnibus bill went to Obama, the provisions were removed from the final version of the Pentagon funding bill and the 2016 omnibus budget. So the law authorized Pentagon to provide Kiev with anti-armor weapon systems, mortars, ammunition, grenade launchers, small arms and ammunition, counter-artillery radars, drones, cyber capabilities. And they also have in there that they can train the Kiev regime forces, and it'll be managed by the American 173rd Airborne Brigade at camp in Lviv in western Ukraine. So the question is, how did this happen? Well, last summer, as the NDAA was making its way through Congress, John Conyers and Ted Yoho put forth an amendment that would have ruled out training or arming the notorious Azov Battalion, which is a neo-Nazi and fascist unit that operates inside of Ukraine, which was part of the coup d'etat. it just so happened when Obama signed the omnibus spending bill, which was also known as the House Resolution 2029, in December, the 2,000 plus page law, that section disappeared. It didn't have anything in there whatsoever. And it was very specific that weapons and aid could not go to any of these groups. And right now, there's no exclusions of where the aid can go to. And this should tell you something. This tells you that they are funding these groups. They're using them once again. They're using them for this offensive that is coming up. And all the evidence that we've gathered so far points in this direction. Now, Turkey is going after academics, professors, teachers, and more than 1,200 academics are now being investigated inside Turkey for criticizing the Turkish state, and they're saying that they're participating in terrorist propaganda after all these academics got together and they signed a declaration condemning military operations against the Kurdish rebels in the southeast of the country. And around 1,200 academics from 89 universities signed this declaration, which was titled, "We won't be part of this crime." And basically what's happening right now is Erdogan and his group are coming down on these people for basically criticizing, disagreeing with the government, and showing their support by banding together and signing a document that's saying that we won't be part of this crime. And how does the government react? Well, they call them terrorists. They call it propaganda. They detain 12 of the academics. The others are being investigated. And they're trying to shut all of these people up. And this is the scary part about freedom of speech, about the rights of the people. Because when you remove it, this is what happens. And we're seeing it firsthand. And remember, Turkey is member of NATO. The U.S. supports Turkey. And we need to start looking at the different countries that the U.S. supports, because we're starting to see a common theme here, where a lot of these countries are run by dictators that don't allow freedom of the press, that don't allow freedom of speech, that don't allow people to have weapons in their country, that call anyone that disagrees with the government a terrorist. And we're starting to see this in many different areas and many different countries that the U.S. does business with. And I'm talking about the U.S. government, not the people of the United States. And I'm not talking about the people of these other countries. It's the governments that I'm talking about. So we're all clear on this. Now, the Russian army, they have launched a humanitarian airdrop into Syria to help the civilian population. Because what they've reported is that non-governmental organizations, they've been providing humanitarian aid, but for some reason, all this aid goes to the terrorists. Well, we know that these non-governmental agencies, organizations, they're controlled by governments, by certain groups, by wealthy individuals that are supporting the terrorists. And Russia right now is making sure that the aid goes directly to the civilian population. Now, the U.S. is continually bashing Russia, and they're starting on a new propaganda track here. And what they're saying is that out of all these bombings that Russia is doing in Syria, they are causing hundreds of civilian casualties and the displacement of over 100,000 residents. It's just awful. But we know they've liberated hundreds and hundreds of towns and cities inside Syria, where people were cheering and saying, thank God, because the terrorists that were holding us captive, they were brutal, and it was very, very difficult to live. So the question is, where are they getting this information, and how are they using this propaganda? So we're seeing these reports come out, and we see it's coming from the U.S. State Department. But if you read carefully, you'll notice, however, that it is not actually civilian casualties that are on the rise, but rather merely reports of them that are increasing. By examining the nature of both the reports and those who are making them, we can see that the latest media campaign pursued by the West is, guess what, fake. Because the question is, who is reporting on this, and where is the State Department getting their information? Well, they're getting it from the Amnesty International, and their report section, called Methodology, points out the following. Amnesty International researched remotely more than 25 Russian attacks in Syria between September and December of 2015. It reviewed by phone or over the internet 16 witnesses to attacks and their aftermath, and spoke to more than a dozen Syrian human rights defenders and representatives of medical organizations supporting work in the areas of the attack. It also reviewed reports of Syrian and international human rights organizations, humanitarian organizations, UN agencies, military and weapons analysts, and open source research networks. In other words, the entire report is based on hearsay from the very people fighting against the Syrian government, and or in league with the very armed terrorist organization. And basically, the United States is using this information, especially that one person, Rami Abdulrahman, who's a UK-based anti-Syrian activist who reports out of his bedroom about what is going on inside Syria, and they use his information. And what we're seeing right now, this is a propaganda trick to convince everyone that Russia is displacing hundreds of thousands of people and killing civilians. But what's very interesting about all this is that actual reports are coming in showing that the United States has killed civilians. Now, we see what's going on in Yemen with Saudi Arabia. We know we have the human rights watchdog down there and the UN down there saying, yes, here is the evidence that Saudi Arabia purposely bombed this area. We know the United States bombed an Afghanistan hospital. And here we have reports that at least 8 civilians were killed in the U.S. airstrikes targeting the Islamic State. The U.S. military looked into it, and the U.S. Central Command said it had identified 5 airstrikes in which, yes, civilians were killed. And they're looking into the others. So they were brought real evidence. They had to look into it, and they found out that, yes, they did this. They have brought no real evidence to Russia so they can research this to see if they actually hit civilians. They're using propaganda. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter gave the most extensive account of the Pentagon's plan to escalate the war in Iraq and Syria. They're making preparations. We already know there's soldiers that are heading towards Iraq and Syria, special op teams, to basically try to get the Iraqi army off of the Islamic State and let the Islamic State either slither out of the country or rebuild them. And we see right now that all this is being pushed forward to have a major confrontation in the Middle East. We know that the president right now is pushing for the authorization for war. We know that Ashton Carter has already said that, the battle on the war on the Islamic State is not just in Iraq and Syria, it's spreading to the other countries, which we knew this is what was going to happen. And we see already they're telling us that Libya is being overrun by the Islamic State. Yemen, they're telling us that the Islamic State is in there and Al Qaeda is in there. And they are going to push this because they need to get into each one of these countries again. Now, we see there is a warning in Italy in 4 Italian cities. Now, the the Italian citizens there are going to perform a mass demonstration, and it's scheduled to take place in Rome, Milan, and other cities between January 16th and 27th. And the embassy, the U.S. embassy there, is advising Americans to stay away from the demonstrations. And we need to watch that situation very carefully because we know they want Italy involved in the fight against the Islamic State in Syria. We know that Italy is going to be involved in Libya. And I'm just wondering if they're planning on some type of false flag event during this time period, and this is why this warning is coming out now. Am I saying there's going to be one? No, this is something to look at because we did get this warning. Now, we realize at this point that this economy is starting to fall apart. It's deteriorating. We're getting warning shots. We saw what happened in the market. We see all the economic indicators telling us that things are rapidly falling apart, and they're not going to just turn around overnight and improve. The debt is unsustainable. We have bubbles everywhere. And I've been saying for a very long time that everyone needs to prepare and get ready. And we all need to start looking at what we are doing at this point. Because you don't want to be caught in a situation, and I know a lot of people were looking at the market wondering, is this it? And things that should be going through your head are, okay, if this is it, am I really ready for this? Am I ready for this market to collapse and the U.S. to come out and say, yeah, we're in an economic collapse. We're going to see mass layoffs. We're going to see inflation, and things are going to rapidly deteriorate as time goes on? Well, we saw what happened today. And when this collapse does occur, it's going to happen very quickly. I don't think it's going to be a slow, drawn-out thing. I think it's going to come down very, very quickly because they're going to want to blame this on another country or group. And you need to make sure that you are prepared and ready for something like this. You need to make sure that you have cash on hand. I know a lot of people say don't have cash, but you need cash because people are not going to understand what gold and silver are in the beginning. So yes, you need gold and silver. You need to try to talk to neighbors. I know it's very difficult to do so. I have trouble with it also. But it would be nice to have neighbors, friends, and others on the same page when this thing goes down. We should all make sure that we have the emergency food stores ready to go. We should have enough for ourselves. We should have enough for our family, our friends, just in case. And when you're storing the food, make sure you just don't want it to sit there over time. You want to take the oldest and eat it and continually rotate it. Make sure that you have a bug out plan for your family. If you have children that go to school or have other activities, make sure they understand, or you have a plan where you need to pick them up, or you have a plan of where to meet them if things start to rapidly fall apart. Every family should have a bug out bag. And you should have everything in there that you'll need. Clothes, medicine, emergency supplies, a weapon. When civil unrest starts and everything starts to spiral out of control, make sure you avoid very populated areas. Make sure your cars always have at least a half a tank. If you can, fill it up. I mean, they're making it easier for us now. They're lowering the gas price. So I would make sure that the gas tank is filled more times than not. You need to think ahead about medicines and medical supplies for your family. What will they need? You need to make sure you have gold and silver. And we see gold is going back up right now. Now, will it be suppressed once again? Most likely. But this is an opportunity to pick this up very cheaply. Because when things start going bad, gold and silver are going to rise very, very quickly. And most people will be priced out of the market and they will not be able to go get it. Actually, supplies will probably completely run out. These are some of the things that you need to do. Are there more? Yes, there are. But at least if you do the basics and you get prepared for what is coming, you will be better off in the long run. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.